Well, kids, welcome to another edition of Rimshots with Sean, brought to you by Barstools and Bandtalk. And I've got another friend from Phoenix. You've been seeing me post some stuff about Phoenix, and I'm hoping to get out there in April. My guy, Bobby Sisk, who just started his YouTube channel, by the way, get on there and check it out, connected me with another fine fellow. This is Brian Buzard, who is all the way from Phoenix. How you doing, Brian?
Good. How are you, sir?
I'm hanging in there. Bobby gave me the what on you, but I thought that what we could do is instead of me spilling the beans, we have you on here. So you know Bobby because you and he were in a band together years ago, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes. We were in a project. It was kind of a cover band thing, and it was kind of a mishmash of a bunch of different local musicians. Bobby's a phenomenal singer, and he did just launch his YouTube channel. I think he's got three videos up there now already. So,
yeah, and I mean, I love Bob. I talk to him probably every day. Sometimes we'll go a week without talking. My thing with Bobby is get out of your own head, man, because you're good. You're good. You don't need to prove how good you are to anybody. But he's super particular about what he does, and so that's fine. I mean, he cares, right?
Yeah, he does for sure. He is a professional for sure.
Right on. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about you, Brian. Your background. You mentioned you're playing in a cover band with Bobby, but obviously you've done other things too. So just give us a little info on you.
So my trajectory was kind of obviously after I took piano lessons when I was like 5. I started out as a drummer. I thought that was my path for sure, was going to be as a drummer. I played in jazz band in high school, but in between that time, I started taking up guitar because it looked hard to me. I was like, this looks difficult. I want to learn how to do this. And I saw my dad played, and I watched him playing. I was like, I got to learn how to do that because that looks complicated. So I started playing guitar at 12 while still playing drums. And then I got to a point where my parents, I have a big family, like 9 brothers and sisters. And my parents couldn't really afford to get me a proper drum set. You know what I mean? So I ended up switching to electric guitar because I could afford to get an electric guitar for $35. You know what I mean?
Right.
But I still carry that drummer mentality with me for sure. So anyway, I switched to guitar, started playing with some friends in the neighborhood. Kenny Ball, who is a drummer, and Pete Oliphant is a bass player. And we formed several different bands, Bastille, and then a band called Matrix. And Matrix lives on to this day. Danny Pettit is the singer. He also sings in a Zeppelin cover band. So we've all been friends for like 40 years probably. And we get together, we play a couple shows a year. That's fun. But after Matrix, I kind of started trying to move on and try to maybe explore some other avenues. So I started playing with a band called Ruckus in the 80s, late 80s. We were fairly successful in the local scene. We were playing weekends and actually making a little bit of money. That was cool. But then while I was playing with Ruckus, a friend of mine, Mikey Gibrino from Kaiser, in a band called Kaiser, he is passed away a couple of years ago, but he had a demo tape from Ken Mary, who is the drummer for Flotsam and Jetsam. Mm-hmm. At the time, he had just come out of House of Lords as the drummer. And so he had a demo of himself, he wrote some songs and he was singing and playing drums. And Mikey asked, hey, do you want to audition for this thing? And I was like, sure, I give it a shot. And so one thing led to another there, and I went to an audition. And interestingly, for some reason, I thought he was looking for like a lead player. So I learned all the solos on the demo, and I went over to his house, and the song started playing. He's like, what are you doing? Aren't you playing? I was like, oh, I'm waiting for the solo to come up. And it was kind of a disaster audition, but somehow I made it through, and we recorded an album under the band name Soul Shock Remedy with some really phenomenal players. Michael Wagner mixed that. And it was quite an experience. It was the first time I'd ever really recorded in the way that you record now, where it's like, I'd go up to Ken's place, we'd lay down guitar tracks, and then Mark Stratford would come in and lay bass tracks down later, and then Ken laid all the drums down. So I never really met everyone in the band until the album was done. And we started having rehearsals, and we had to find a drummer because Ken was going to be a front man. And it was a whole thing. So Randy Scott, he had played in a band called Risque. He's also played with Enough's Enough. And anyway, he came on as a drummer. And so we set off on trying to conquer the world as Soul Shuck Remedy. And we played a couple of shows in California for some labels, and we ended up getting, and Ken knows more of the details than I do, but I think we got a distribution deal through a label called REX that was distributed through Warner Brothers, I think. And so we were kind of on our way on our own, kind of trying to promote this album. And the band, interestingly, we never really jived completely. And I don't know if it was because of that way of recording, or we never really knew each other or anything, and we got in a room and it sounded all right, but it never had that band feel to me anyway. And so a couple of the guys split. Ken and I kept writing songs under a name called Selling Edsels, and then we kind of lost touch with each other, and that was my short-lived professional musician career. So I ended up taking some time off. I was probably 26. I went back to school. I got a couple of degrees, and I started working for Central Arizona Project, which is a canal system here in the valley. And so I was off on a different road. And then probably by the time I was 33, I started getting back into music again. I built a studio in my house. I actually had money now because I had a job, So yeah. So, and then I started on my solo venture. I released an album in 2004 under the band name The Union Throttle, and it was I got some label interest from Virgin in New York, but it never really went anywhere. And I think it's because when I released it, I had just turned 36, and so I was kind of emailing back and forth with Virgin, and it was probably the third or fourth email, and they said, "Hey, how old are you, by the way?" And I was like, I was afraid. I told my wife, I'm like, I'm not sure I should tell them how old I am. But I did. I said, hey, I just turned 36 or whatever. Never heard from them again. So I think, which is unfortunate, because there's a lot of great musicians who are of a certain vintage, but anyway, the music business since then has like crumbled into like nothing. I don't even know, I can't, I was reading something that Ron Bumblefoot, the guitar player, had said that bands are now like t-shirt salesmen is what they are. And that's the only way they can make any money. So it's crazy. So anyway, I put during COVID, I put out another solo album under the band name No Rabbit, No Race. And that's when I hooked up with Scott Hammonds. He was singing for a Def Leppard tribute band. And we started writing together, and we released a few songs under the band name Lola Vane. And just some pretty good success on streams and YouTube views. We've had probably over a couple hundred streams on Spotify, or a couple 100,000, sorry, and over a couple 100,000 views on YouTube. And so we thought, hey, this thing's got some legs. We got some radio play, but it just kind of falls short. He's in Nashville. I'm here. It's hard to put a band together when you live, really far apart from each other. Mm-hmm. And so we had talked about, hey, we'll put a band together in Nashville and I'll fly out to do some shows, whatever. Just hasn't materialized yet. We're still kind of writing. But the interesting thing is, and I'll share with your audience. So we had, I think, a conglomeration of about 234,000 streams on Spotify, and our check was $314. So,
well, I got to tell you, some people are going, but yeah, it's maybe a little bit higher than what you've been hearing, because there's so much information out there about what get from streaming services, right? Like Peter Frampton put something out about, Baby I Love Your Way gets streamed, 20 million times, and he said he made like, $20 or something. So there's a lot of misinformation. Before we go there, what is it about Phoenix? Because I've had Ken Mary on my show, and super nice guy. What is it about Phoenix that I know so many people there, that, you know, have had success and a lot of different success with a lot of different bands. And, you know, they don't reside in LA. They're in Phoenix. What is it about that town that's so, I guess, appealing to the people that have success in the music business?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'll give you my take on it. Well, number one, the weather's beautiful.
Yeah.
And it's close proximity to LA. At the time, back in the '80s, late '80s, there was kind of a migration to Phoenix from. I know George Lynch lived here for a while. The guys in the Tubes lived down in Tucson. And I think it was a lot cheaper here, cost of living wise. And so Ken moved here in I think the mid '80s or late '80s, right after House of Lords, and he was able to get a really nice place out in Fountain Hills. And since then, real estate out here has gone nuts. But I think that was the genesis of. And then you had a lot of good local bands. You have the Gin Blossoms, you have Jimmy Eat World, you have the Format, like all these kind of local legends, but Phoenix has always been kind of a hodgepodge a little bit. There's a rock scene, there's kind of an alternative scene, and so you get pretty much any flavor you're looking for here. You can find, but the people. One thing there was a little bit of we called it the land of crossed arms, which is what we thought LA was, where you'd go play and there'd be all the musicians in the back standing like this, But in Phoenix, there's it's like a camaraderie, I can't describe it, but everybody, to the extent that they can, they try to support each other and go out and I've met so many really dedicated, cool, excellent musicians here in Phoenix, and they're not, and we're also not afraid to work with each other. Hey, play a guitar track on this song for me, or can you do a vocal for me on this song? And with the kind of explosion of home recording, it's made it really easy to do that. So that was a long answer to your question, but.
Well, it does, and I'll tell you. So in the '90s, when kind of the Seattle thing was happening, Sub Pop Records actually came to where I live, right? And so they kind of were getting, I guess, edged out by the majors. So they said, okay, well, we want to get back to our roots, and so they came to Halifax and they started signing bands. And I wasn't part of that scene. I was watching bands get signed left, right, and center. But the interesting thing was everybody, so the scene that I was in was basically arguing with each other and telling, I'm better than you and I'm better than you. That other scene was doing exactly what you're talking about. They're helping each other out there, collaborating, lending gear, showing up at shows. And their trajectory went like this, you know what I mean? And it took off. And I ended up having to move to Toronto and, I guess escaped that I outran it by a year. But, and I think of the guys that I know there, like yourself now, Bobby, Mick Brown, Greg Chason's out there. Dwayne Miller, Chris Catero, it goes on and on and on. And I mean, that to me, if you've got that many people that have had success in a scene and they all want to help each other, that's a pretty cool vibe. And the weather's nice.
Yeah. And that's funny because off of all those people you just listed, I've worked with all of them except Dwayne Miller. I know him, we've met, but we haven't really, but all the other guys I've either played in a band with or done recording with or something. And so, yeah, it's a pretty tight knit scene, but we're also welcoming to new people that want to come in. You know what I mean?
Well, that's awesome. That's amazing. And I mean, Dwayne, just to give him a little plug, so he was a guy that I grew up, listening to when I was, here, and I got to know him through this podcast. He's a super funny guy. I don't know that I've ever met a guy that owns as many drum sets as that guy. Like, oh my God, I think he said 16 or 17 kits. But just a super, super cool guy. And I mean, I always see hosts from shows out there, and it just always seems so supportive.
Yeah.
And for me, it's a little weird because I lived in Toronto, and in Toronto, the guy that's like cleaning the bar will sit there and tell you suck. You know what I mean? It's really funny.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. I'm sorry to hear that. I mean, there's and this is going to sound really cliche, but there's that saying, a rising tide raises all boats. You know what I mean? Meaning, if somebody finds some success and they're willing to pay it forward a little bit, it makes the scene better. I mean, there's been several bands signed out of Phoenix, that have had some success, and so, yeah, I think that community, that sense of the community is super important,
I'm trying to think of the other band that was early '80s, maybe, that came out of there.
There's
that had,
Flotsam and Jetsam, Sacred Reich, early '80s.
yeah, they would have been like, I mean, I guess they would have been considered maybe a hair metal band.
Oh, Icon. Was it Icon?
Icon. They were from
Yes.
there,
Yeah,
correct?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, Icon. There was Surgical Steel back then. There was some really killer like hard rock, and I was young then. I remember going to see. In fact, yeah, I remember going to see Surgical Steel at that ice skating rink at Metro Center, and Flotsam and Jetsam was called Dogs, and they opened for them. And I remember being struck by AK's voice in the singer for Flotsam. And I was a kid, and they were doing covers. They were doing like Metal Health from Quiet Riot, but this guy's voice, I was like, Jesus Christ, man, this guy can sing. And so flash forward, I remember we played a club called the Bootlegger, and Flotsam had played the night before. And I remember getting up on stage to do sound check, and their set list was still up there, and it was like, wow, that's pretty cool. This is right at the time Jason had gotten tapped for Metallica, and so it was and I was 17 then. Like I was always kind of the young guy, and now I think I'm like the old guy. Funny how that happens.
Well, yeah, it is funny, and I'll ask you about the band that you're playing with Bobby. But one of the things that I'd love to get your take on, because it comes up in my group and my podcast. The YouTube generation of these kids that are just they're phenoms out of the gate, and a lot of people that I've talked to say, well, they're amazing players, but they don't maybe have that seasoning or the experiences to go along with the talent. So being out in the road and starving or having to argue with a club owner, that's the part that they're missing that maybe could help them go over the top. I'd be interested to hear what your take is on that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I was listening to something, I can't remember who it was. It was an interview with somebody, but they were talking about that there's these phenoms or these prodigies or these kids out there that but really what they're doing is they're just kind of miming or mimicking the other players, and it's this whole idea of, with the way technology is nowadays, you can be very kind of sequestered by yourself, and you can put videos out and all this stuff. But until you sit in a room with three other people and you try to write together, which is interesting, because I just did that for the first time in a while with Chris Cotero the other night, and it was mind blowing. But yeah, I think there's these kids, and they're really good. They're way better than I'll ever be. So they're putting the time in to learn chops and stuff, but it's that idea of, so you've learned enough, why don't you take that and try to make it your own, and do something on your own, and then go find some other people and get, like Dave Grohl said, get in a garage, turn up your amps and suck for the first year, and get to know each other and build camaraderie, and then keep playing, and eventually you won't suck as much, and then you'll have a thing and you can go take it out and try to play. I'm really concerned about AI. That's the thing that probably scares me the most, is that they can take someone's voice and mimic it. And that concerns me that in 100 years from now, people won't be writing music anymore, which is frightening to me, actually,
Well, and I mean, let's talk what it is. I mean, they're basically trying to get to a point where people do absolutely nothing and move forward, right? Which is really sad. I mean, I'm going to guess you and I are in around the same vintage. And I mean, I talk to people about, I remember having to put like stacks of quarters on the arm of my record player to slow the thing down to try to figure out a drum fill. And they're like, what?
Yeah.
Why didn't you just go on YouTube? Because there was no YouTube.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, if they don't get that.
You're right. That's a great point. I mean, if I'm playing in a cover thing and it's like, hey, there's the set list, I go straight to YouTube and I start looking up the covers and the playthroughs that people do, and because I'm a kind of a visual learner, and I don't know music theory that well. I know a little bit, but I mean, it's crazy what you can find if you search the internet. You know what I mean?
I just find when Kobo was going on, I would geek out on the isolated drum tracks, and hearing the Highway Star, and some of those little stuff, you don't really hear them because they're buried, but a couple little maybe hi-hat flubs or something, you're going like, that's what made it move. Or listening to Vinny Appice do Rainbow in the Dark, and it's like, I had no idea he was doing that many ghost notes on the snare. and now everything is just it's so robotic. I find like there's that aspect of the human element is almost shunned.
Yeah, and that's so funny you brought up Vinny Appice, because I just listened to a isolated track from him also, and I was like, wow, what an amazing player. But the one that always gets me is "Fool in the Rain," John Bonham. Like that one always is just like it's such an amazing groove, and that pretty shuffle that he does, just so fucking awesome.
Yeah, and I mean, if you want a good one, and it's funny because Katero sent me a video of his band like in the '90s with Bruce Dickinson. They're doing I want to say it was Flight of Icarus.
Yeah.
If you hear that isolated vocal track by Bruce Dickinson, go find it and listen to it. It's insane. And I mean, it's like, so people always ripping on the metal guys, and it's like, what?
And then the David Lee Roth isolated vocal for "Running with the Devil" is just insanely good. I can do that shit all day long,
Oh yeah. So the band that you're playing in with Bobby, he told me a little bit about this band. I mean, like I say, that guy, I mean, I say to him all the time, like, you were the guy I would have been looking for back when I was trying to find a singer, and I always wound up with the good-looking guy that couldn't carry a tune, right?
Exactly.
I've seen some footage of you guys, and you're doing some pretty cool stuff. You're planning on doing more this year? Because I know he kind of maybe left one of the projects that he was in, but what do you have on the go with him this year?
So this thing with Bobby is kind of like in its infantile stage right now. He's just a couple weeks ago, he sent the first track over for us to work on, and since then we've I went over and I had a session with Chris Guitaro and Michael. I think it's Enos is how he pronounces his name. He's a guitar player, and the three of us just got in there and started working on it, and we came up with a second song. And so that's kind of where we're at. We haven't tracked anything yet, but it's an interesting. The project intrigues me because every person that's associated with it is a phenomenal player and professional, consummate professional. And it's like, and you get in a room with those guys, and you're just like, whoa, like I gotta up my game because these guys know what they're doing. You know what I mean? So yeah, I wish I had something for you to listen to at this point, but it's very new. It doesn't even have a name yet. We don't even know, who all the players are going to be yet, but it's pretty exciting because Bobby's, like I said, a phenomenal singer. Chris is a phenomenal producer. I have a recording studio. I've been producing, and it's just, it's really cool. I'm looking forward to where it goes,
Well, Bobby's funny because he'll send me something and it sounds great, and I go, that sounds awesome. You always say that. Well, what am I supposed to say?
Yeah.
It sucks because it doesn't. And then he'll tell me, I got to work on this line. It's like, I wouldn't touch a thing. It sounds great to me. But and my plan is to get out there. Is it the big bike rally that happens in April?
Is it Biketoberfest or something like that? Yeah. It's
That's the plan, man.
It's Bike Week. I'm sorry, that's what it is. And they have one in the spring and they have one in the fall, usually in October and April, I think.
April's the one I think I'm planning on getting out to. So, my viewers, Brian, if they want to find out more about what you're doing, because I've all of a sudden gone from an East Coast to Canada podcast to a lot of my viewers are in LA, Phoenix, the States. Where do my folks find out about what you're up to?
So you can go to my Instagram or Facebook to see where I'm at. But if you want to hear some of my music, you can look up No Rabbit, No Race is one of my solo albums, and then The Union Throttle. Lola Vane is another project that if you just Google those, you'll find all kinds of stuff. There's Spotify and iTunes and all the other streaming services. So that's probably the best way. Or you can Google my name, see what comes up. I haven't done that in a while, so I don't know.
It's always fun to Google yourself, isn't it?
It's 1Z, by the way, just to let everyone know.
I got it. And hence Buzard as opposed to Buzzard, right? So,
yes,
sir, exactly. Very nice to finally meet you, and hopefully I'll get to see you out there in April. Let's keep in touch. I want to see what you guys do because, like I say, I know Bobby's talent. I wish Bobby would know Bobby's talent sometimes, but we'll work on him, right?
Yeah. Hey, at least
have a great day.
He's humble, so that's good, right?
Oh, he is 100%, and he's funny as hell, right?
Yeah, he is.
You know, I will say, you know, they always say, you know, you got to make it outside your own backyard before you make it in your backyard. And, you know, Bobby and his group of friends kind of really have supported me more so than some people here where I live, right? So
Yeah.
I really appreciate them. And Mark Gus Scott would be another guy that I know out there.
Yeah, love him too.
My friend, you have a great weekend. It was very nice to meet you.
You too, Sean. Appreciate it.
Peace.
Peace out.